Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm Tracy Gelb, your host. I'm so excited to have Miss Cathy. Do you say your middle name as well? Do I say it or just the Pickett?
Listen,
Either.
I
All
got
of the
so
above.
many. All the above.
All of the above. Miss Cathy Robinson Pickett on today. I met her through a friend that somehow I ended up seeing some of her posts on Facebook and some of her wonderful adventures that she has, and I was so curious to meet her. So I reached out to the mutual friend and said, I would love to meet this lady. And without further ado, welcome, Cathy, and thank you so much. And I want to hear all about you.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm definitely excited Rosemary hooked us up. So, it's been great getting to know you. So let's talk. What you want to talk
Yes,
about?
yes, yes. I want to hear first, we're going to go back to the beginning. I want to hear your initial story, how everything started.
Okay. So I was born. um, so I guess I'll just say for your viewers, I am a seventh generation native Floridian. We are endangered species. So I was born and grew up in North Florida. I was born to amazing parents who are definitely flower children that fell out of the 60s. My daddy is a Methodist minister and a political science professor. My mom a teacher. And so I grew up in a very formative household. And thank goodness, because that is the reason I am who I am today. But everything was, what do they call it? Everything was coming up roses until it wasn't, right? So between my 18th and 19th birthday, I was robbed and left for dead and raped and left for dead in a cooler. And that was in 1984, so 40 years ago, which it's really hard to believe that that's been 40 years, but July 4th made 40 years. And so you might guess I have a little bit of a trauma brain from that, but I went on. I finished college. I married my college sweetheart and went on to do what you do, grow up, have grown up jobs and have babies. And I had my daughter, Lindsay, and I was actually pregnant with my son when my now ex-husband and I decided we should be responsible adults. And with that responsibility comes getting more life insurance and all that good stuff. We went to our doctor, had a life insurance physical done, and part of the physical was an HIV test. No big deal, except 2 weeks later on a Monday morning, my phone rang and it was Mark. Mark was my doctor. I had known Mark since college years. I had known his wife since ninth grade. So we were really good friends. And Mark said, hey, Cathy, can you and Dan have lunch with me today? And I said, well, Dan's in Atlanta on business, but I'll come by and bring Lindsay and we can go to lunch. I went with checkbook in tow, quite sure he was going to hit me up for a donation for Save the Whales, Girl Scout cookies, or whatever the charity of the week was at that time. When I got there, his office was just empty and quiet. And I thought, man, it must be my actual initial thought, and I mean nothing bad by this. My initial thought was, man, it must be a Jewish holiday I don't know about because he was Jewish and nobody was there, right? It was a Monday morning. And his receptionist sent me back to the back. And what your viewers have to keep in mind is this is 1991. So this is before cell phones. This is before computers. Even MacGyver didn't have a cell phone in 1991, I don't think. And so I was sitting at his desk reading a McCall's magazine, and Lindsay was playing around on the floor, and the office door opened, and he walked in, and his nurse was behind him, and they were both as white as a sheet of paper. And he says, oh my God, Cathy, I don't know how to tell you this, but you and Dan have AIDS, and I have no idea where it came from. He began to cry. His nurse began to cry. They asked me if I had a will, and then they both ran the room trying to console each other to pull it together. And there I sat, and it felt like I sat there an eternity. Of course, it wasn't an eternity, but after about 10 minutes, I just gathered Lindsay up. She was 11 months old. I strapped her in her car seat and I drove home. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang and it was Mark. And he said, listen, I think I know where this came from. We got to go back to college. And Mark obviously knew everything that happened to me. And I said, Mark, they went to prison. If they had HIV, I would have known. And he said, no, Cathy, I really don't think so. And so the next day we called a friend who happened to be an attorney in the state's attorney's office at that time. And it didn't take a lot of typing and a lot of anything to find a death certificate where indeed one of the men who had sexually assaulted me had died in prison before I was even ever married. The law in the state of Florida at that time said no matter what the crime, rape, child molestation, or sexual assault, the victim of the crime was not notified of the attacker status unless the attacker gave their permission. We have managed to change those laws. However, it is still very difficult in some states to get perpetrators tested. The bottom line is we knew what we had and where it came from. What we didn't know is what to do about it. We didn't tell anybody at all for the first month. And then my parents came up for Lindsay's first birthday party. And my daddy got out of his car and he looked into my face and he knew there was something catastrophically wrong. He didn't know what, but he obviously looked at me once and knew. We told him what had happened. Immediately, they began to convince us that everything was going to be okay. We were going to get through this. My mom took a leave of absence. I don't even think she went back. I don't even think she went back to Clewiston. And my dad, and because I'm fixing to have another baby momentarily at this point. And so a couple months passed and it came time to give birth to Garrett. And we went to the hospital. Lindsay had been born in 14 months before to the day. And 3 nurses refused to come in and help deliver her. And one of those nurses, not knowing anything at all about me, decided I was a horrible person because I was HIV positive and pregnant, considered that child abuse, and called HRS to see if, and DCF now, HRS to see if they would come and take away our kids. That can't happen. But at 6 o'clock, I gave birth at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 6 o'clock, she was knocking on the door, a case manager from HRS. And she was an elderly African-American woman. And when she came in, I'll never forget what she said. She looked at me and she said, oh my gosh, you're not what I expected. And I knew exactly what she meant, right? I wasn't what she expected. She expected to find an IV drug user or a prostitute or, whatever. Again, this is 1991, right? And within a short period of time, she said, I can't believe this is happening to someone like you. And that rang so deep into my core, because if it was happening to me, what was happening to everybody else, right? And so when she left, I took my IVs out, I gathered my newborn baby, and I got dressed and I went to leave the hospital. No one tried to stop me. No one at all. I walked down the hall, got on the elevator, went downstairs because my dad always taught me to keep change for the phone. I had money for the pay phone. I called a taxi cab, and there was a support group meeting that night. The first thing I had done was find a support group when we were diagnosed, and it was Osland House. It was all white gay men. It was all white collar gay men. And when I had called them, they said, we don't know what it is to be a woman, but we know what it is to live with this disease. So the cab driver took me to my support group meeting. And luckily, one of those members of that support group meeting was a physician with privileges in another hospital. And he put my behind right back in a car and took me to his hospital and readmitted me. And, but that was it. I knew in that second that my life was never going to be the same, no matter what. I was not going to live the rest of my life in hiding and in fear. So, yeah, that's the beginning. And
you mentioned to me that you've been on that, your kids kind of grew up in the public light, that you've done some interviews with things like, People Magazine and 2020. And tell me a little more about that. Was that all just because you are a white woman with, a Caucasian woman with HIV in the early 1990s?
Sure. So yes, the short answer to that is when I went public, very quickly, my husband's corporation eradicated his position. They didn't fire him. They just wiped the position out of the company. So we ended up filing bankruptcy, moving home to my parents, and not living with my parents for real long, but moving to where my parents lived. And it became very clear as I began to work on changing the laws around rape victims that I had a platform that other people didn't, right? At that time, there were two other public women in the United States, three, Kimberly Bergalis, Barbara Webb, and oh my goodness, totally just went blank. But
Okay.
one other woman, Elizabeth Glacier, Starsky and Hutch's wife. And it was us. That was it. So my story was compelling. It opened doors that wouldn't open for other people. And the men around me, all without fail, all of them in every support group, every meeting, all of them were like, you have the platform and you must use it. You have the chance to tell the story that's not being told. You have the chance to get in the doors that we can't get in. That education has to happen. No other country in the world called this a gay disease, and no other Western country in the world faced the same epidemic that we did in the United States, right? And so absolutely, those shows called me because of who I was. And that was fine. You know, I was willing to do that. Now, in that, my first marriage fell apart very rapidly because he was not on board for that. And nor was he on board for what that meant to his life. And that's fine. But, you know, at that moment, I thought my life expectancy, everyone thought everyone's life expectancy was very short, right? And this is 92, 93, 94, 95. I tell this story sometimes when Garrett was born, I literally remember one night being in his nursery and on my hands and knees, I prayed to God, God, please let me live to be 30. Because I thought if I lived to be 30, that maybe there would be a chance that they would, because I was 26, that they would have enough memories of me to remember something, right? And as I quickly approach 60, I'm still renegotiating that number.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm renegotiating that number, right? But so absolutely, that those doors open because of who I was. And I tell people all the time, when I was in higher ed, I told my students, you use everything you have. If you can apply for a grant because the color of your skin, you apply for it. If you can apply for a grant because you're Jewish, you apply for it. You can apply for a grant because you're first generation, you apply for it. Whatever tools you have in your toolbox, you use them and you use all of them. And I was really good at doing that in those early days. And hopefully it made a difference.
Oh, I'm sure it made a huge difference. And I didn't even know. I was so fascinated because what I saw on Facebook was you going to Tanzania. And I would see you with these young ladies and these people. And I'm born, actually, I don't know if I even told you this, in Johannesburg, South Africa, quite a few years back. I've never been to Tanzania, but some friends of mine that are mutual friends have been there to try to, you know, nothing like what you're doing. But tell me a little bit about that because it's amazing what you do.
Well, I think I see a trip in your future, man. Some of these folks on here will tell you, Friends Together is Hotel California. Once you check in, you're there. Some of these folks on my side of things are former students that 20 years ago were my students in college, and they checked in and they're stuck still 20 years later. So, you know, those things kind of happen. But Tanzania started 20 years ago. In 1999, when it really looked like I was going to die. I had breast cancer on top of the HIV. Things were looking really bad. The doctor told me to get my affairs in order. And so my second husband, who is my late husband, my second husband said to me, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I wanted to start a foundation. I wanted to start something bigger than me. So we started Friends Together. And originally we worked with families, whatever someone's family is, gay couple, straight couple, single mom, single dad, foster families in Florida. We're an all volunteer organization. No one gets paid, including me. And we would bring these families to camp. And at camp, we help them get plans to live instead of plans to die. And so we started doing that. We had our first camp in 2000, and we would do 4 to 5 camps a year. And in 2003, my late husband came home from work one day, and he walked into the kitchen and he set his briefcase down and he kissed me on top of the head. That was a sign. He was either going to ask me or tell me something I did not like, or tell me something that was going to cost us a whole lot of money. And in this case, it was both. He says to me, we're going to go to Tanzania, and he always used we are going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and raise money for Friends Together. There is no we in that. There is zero we. Look at this. Do I look like I'm climbing the highest freestanding mountain in the world? That is not happening. But we did go for the first time in 2004, and we had a boatload of volunteers. And as it happens, because this is the week anniversary time of Charlie, it was right after Charlie the hurricane, and right after I'd hired Riley to work for me, and we went, and our full intention was to raise money for our programs here. But we had collected medical supplies and, those sort of things, what you do when you go to a third world country. And just as Steve was on the mountain, I was busy falling in love, with every single piece of the country and every single thing. But ultimately, the owner of the tour company where we were staying, Zainab, she sat down and was talking to me one day. And when I said I had HIV, she almost fell off her chair. And she asked me if I would talk to her staff. And I said, of course I will. And then she asked me if I would talk to the porters for the mountains. And I said, of course I will. Well, no one could believe that a white, fluffy woman had HIV, right? And in that moment, like things began to click in my head, right? I really had a chance to make a difference. Well, the same thing was happening to Steve on the mountain. And when he came down the mountain, he looked like Moses. He hadn't shaven in 8 days. He hadn't had a bath. He had summited, and he was carrying tablets. They were spiral notebooks, but tablets. And they were the edicts of what we were going to do and how we were going to spend part of our time in Tanzania and part of our time in the US. And so we came home, and at that time I was on staff at Florida Southern. I went to the former president of Florida Southern and said, what do you think about this being a study abroad trip? And he was all in. Several of the other colleges I worked with, all in. I didn't have to say anything. They were just all in. So we started planning, but there are no guarantees in life. And on April 25th of 2005, my late husband went to work one day, and a semi-truck driver fell asleep behind the wheel, and I became a widow before I was 40. So I become a widow, and I've got 400 Friends Together kids depending on me. But now I've made all these promises to people in a foreign country, right? And people, very vulnerable people in a foreign country who get made promises to all the time that are never kept. And so what was I going to do? How do I make this happen? So we had to figure it out, but we did, and we went back. But my son was 13 when Steve died, and he came home from school one day, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after Steve passed away, and said, Mom, I'm going to climb the mountain, and I'm going to take Steve's ashes to the top. And I said, Garrett, you are 13 years old. The only mountain you are climbing is Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia. No. But he did. And at 14, he summited, and he took Steve's ashes to the top, and that was that. That cemented in our work. There was no choice. It was a done deal. I made a generational commitment to the work that we do. And so our work has evolved. Originally, we partnered with other organizations. And about the time my son headed off to college and was in college, we really started looking at things and realizing, we need to be doing our own thing. Why are we not doing our own stuff? And so we currently, we, for a long time now, partner with a local organization that was started by a couple that services 400 HIV positive women. At the time, they were in need of having an elementary school finished out for them. So we did that. And then we built a clinic and we built a tailoring school for them. But our biggest project, and the project that is probably the most important to me overall in the continuation of what I hope will continue on forever when I'm not here, is that what I became to recognize, which many people who come from third world nations will recognize, is that girls don't go to school when they're on their period if you live in a third world country. Access to pads is just prohibited unless you are rich. That's it. You just, it doesn't happen. And so we decided to tackle that. And so we have a reusable sanitary pad project, and we hire our tailoring students back, the ones that don't find other jobs, to sew pads. And this summer, we distributed pads to 4,000 young women across Tanzania for free. $20 sponsors a young woman for a year or more. So, you know, it's where else can you spend $20 and know that you've changed the trajectory of someone's life?
I'm
And
like, the more you're talking, I mean, I didn't know, I knew some of the things that you, it's so amazing. It's just amazing. You know, you talk about purposeful. And when I hear stories sometimes, or I'm going to be honest with you, when I start having a little pity party of one, thinking things have happened to me, I mean, I just want to ask you, and I'm being serious with you, how do you stay like you do? Like, how do you stay so positive? Is it the purpose? Is it all of the above? Is it just,
understand I have bad days. Okay, first off, everybody needs to know everybody has bad days, right? I just don't allow myself to stay in those. You know, you can't stay stuck, whatever the bad is. I am surrounded by amazing folks. I am so incredibly lucky. My parents are still alive. I'm remarried for the third time, and my father-in-law lives with us. So I'm surrounded by unconditional love. And my kids are fantastic. And I've got 2 new grandbabies. So I have all the reason in the world to live a healthy and purposeful life. And, you know, happiness is a choice. Joy is a choice. Joy is a choice. And for years, I've tried to choose happy. And last year, I realized I need to try to choose joy. And I've spent the last 9 months really working on figuring out how to choose joy.
I'm I can't even tell you. I want to be around you a lot. I just want I'm not just saying that. I really mean that. I think, you know, think about that. I mean, I have this program that I teach that I told you about, Ageless Grace, and I have one of the educators that always plays this song, and it's called Joy. I think it's by King and Country, and I always, when I hear it and I think about joy, and I knew a little bit of your story because we spoke on the phone, but not to the extent. And for you to be here, and I mean here in all the ways that I mean here. And I know on your free time, because you have so much of it, you're doing this thing that you told me about besides everything with Tanzania and teaching. And I know you teach at Nova and teach at different places. You're doing something called Souls to the Poles.
Souls to the Poles.
Souls to the Poles. Tell us about that.
There's nothing more important right now, folks. If you are on here and you are in the state of Florida, the polls open at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning if you did not early vote. So Souls to the Polls, when I was at Florida Southern, a former governor in our state made it so we couldn't have precincts on college campuses. And I was like, we were a residential college and our freshmen and sophomores did not have cars on campus. How are they going to vote? Right. And so I organized to be able to get them to vote. And I've been gone from Florida Southern 12 years, but I have driven for every election since then. And whether it's local or state or national elections, turning out the vote is incredibly important. And my dad, I asked my dad some questions yesterday, because my dad was a political science professor for 40 years. And so I realized people have so little knowledge around why it's important to vote in the primaries. What does the electoral college mean? You know, those kinds of things. So I made these TikTok videos of my dad, and they like called on like wildfire yesterday. And I can't believe how many questions are on them and comments and stuff. But my dad said, voting is your civic duty for living in a free country. And I thought, that's just perfect, right? It's your civic duty. And so
Yes.
I've shared with you that I have had to back off the national news. I have had to suspend news apps on my phone. I have had to do a lot of that, and I have. And I made a promise to myself when I came home from Tanzania that because I've got a month over there with no TV, right? That I was going to stay away from the news, because the news put me on, last election cycle, put me on 2 blood pressure pills. And I was in bad shape. And so I have really limited, I had to put parental controls on my news apps because I have no willpower. So I parental controlled my Sirius radio, so I can't listen to it in the van and that sort of thing. But I can drive people to vote, and that's tangible, right?
Yes. I want to know so how can we reach you, please? If people need to help with voting, or want to hear, or want to join you in Tanzania, or want to help you with all your amazing things.
Absolutely. Well, I sent you the card earlier, but the best way to reach me is email. My personal email is hiveducation@aol.com. Facebook is always a great way. So my whole name is on the screen, and that is my personal Facebook name. Our Friends Together page is friends with a hyphen together. And if you just really want to know more about what we do and see what we do, please visit our YouTube channel. And it's weird. Our URL is weird on YouTube, but it's Friends with a Space Together Inc. And you can see videos, and you can see what we do. There are things for anybody to do. There are several people on here right now that have been to Tanzania multiple times. And, it doesn't matter how old you are, young or old. We've had as young as 13 and as old as 80. So we will find something for you to do. And I tell people, Africa tells you what you're supposed to do. And that's no lie. It does. It speaks to you when you get there.
Well, you're not going to believe this, but we have 1 minute left. I feel like I could talk to you for 8.5 hours, and I have a feeling one day I will. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your openness, for your service. I mean, this is service. This is what service is, being beyond service. I mean, just everything that you've said is incredible. And for what you've been through, to be so positive and to have joy. And of course, I tell myself this, not every day is going to be a great day, but we can make every day, as good as we can, just as good as we can. And you have beyond inspired me. I'm telling you, I am going to be doing some crazy soul to the polling. I'm letting everyone know. So I'm going to be putting it out there. I really mean that. And I have some things I'm working on, with flying a little bit, but you know what? I really think that I would love to do a trip with you. I think it would be magical. And I really believe that. And I just want to thank you. This interview I was so excited. I've been so excited and telling everybody, but it was 10 billion times better than I anticipated. So I thank you. Thank you so much. I mean that. So I will.
So those of you